Hey, what up, everybody? It's time for a set review video. Now, it's been a little bit since I've done this, and I want to say I don't think I've done it on this channel, actually. So, the way that these normally work, we're going to go through, talk about the set, and just see how good it's going to be in different environments. But, like always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, comment, let me know what cards you think I missed out of this Final Fantasy set that will be good in the various respective formats that we're going to be talking about today. Alright, just go ahead and cast Fire Magic on that thing. I've been playing a Final Fantasy game in preparation for this. I've been playing 15, recently started, and gotta say that I enjoy it. I'm sure Noctis would want to subscribe to this channel, so who knows? Do me a favor, subscribe. All right, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what exactly it is that we're going to be doing. So again, we're going to be looking at this set, but we're only going to be looking at it as it applies to competitive 60 card formats. So standard, modern, and I know WotC hasn't given us a season for it since like 2024, technically, but Pioneer too. Now, all of that being said, I know a lot of people play Commander too. Let's be very honest about this. Everything's playable in Commander. If we want to talk about competitive Commander, CEDH, Vivvy's the only playable card in that format besides the bad Stifle that makes you sack a legend. But we all already knew this. But just look at Vivvy. Vivvy's perfect. Sweet little bean. Alright, but let's go ahead and get started by talking a little bit about specifically a modern deck. Alright, the deck that I personally run in modern is definitely getting a lot of good upgrades in this set. Now, a lot of those upgrades are kind of contingent on stuff like Arena of Glory. They're contingent upon you keeping some of these creatures on the battlefield through the attack step or for a turn or two, but they're really, really good. Alright, so yeah, energy needed upgrades, but lightning's kind of lit. Alright, being able to make all of your stuff deal extra damage. People like Aspiring Spike have already talked about lightning being good in so many different shells, not just energy, but burn and everything else, because First Strike, Trample, Lifelink, you can turn all of your lightning bolts into like 6 damage spells for 1. That's so good. And yeah, it is. Turning Flage into 3 mana, 6 damage, gain 3. Lit. I think one of the biggest things that will upgrade the energy archetype is probably going to be Joshua. Just because, yeah, you get the like looting effect that comes off of Seasoned Pyromancer, or the looting effect that comes off of Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but you also get a really relevant body on the backside. Again, if it can last a couple turns. If you're playing this on curve, there's almost no way that Joshua is surviving until turn 5, but if he does, you get to turn him into a 4/4 body that deals 2 and gains you 2, and you get to start returning creatures from your graveyard with total mana value 6 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. And then he flips back over so you can do it again. If you're running lightning in the shell, boom, return lightning, return flage. Like, you've got so many different options. Energy's getting some big upgrades. And considering it's like one of the best modern decks, it's definitely going to be something to kind of keep an eye on. Now, as far as like the best decks in a couple of formats, Energy's up there for modern, but Prowess is there basically for standard, for Pioneer, and for modern. Now, sure, we can definitely say that Phoenix and Prowess are like 2 different decks, but bear with me here. Alright, we're going to do Prowess, but different, depending on how we're looking at it. Alright, The core of the Prowess deck as it exists is obviously Corey's Steel Cutter. The blue-red standard Prowess list has a bunch of Prowess creatures and this. The modern Steel Cutter decks have this and a couple other Prowess threats. You're running things like Slickshot Show Off, which Red Mage's Rapier would be really good to kind of do a budget impression of Slickshot Show Off. It's Slickshot Show Off at home, but it doesn't have haste. You can't plot it to evade some of the removal. And sure, you can turn any creature into Slickshot Show Off, but doing it for 3, a little iffy. Alright, as someone who really loves the idea of creating little prowess creatures or creatures that do things whenever you cast like non-creature spells, Red Mage's Rapier and Black Mage's Rod seem like great cards, but they're not going to cut it. Not in these prowess shells. They could be really good in Pauper, but who cares about that non-existent format? Alright, the way that we're going to do prowess different is by doing prowess things with landfall. Tifa, I feel like, is a card that has a lot of potential in these like prowess archetypes because, especially for modern, landfall's a lot easier to trigger. Alright, you can't necessarily do it well in Standard or in Pioneer because you've got Evolving Wilds, you've got Terramorphic Expanse, and Fabled Passage. Those are like the bad versions of it. But in Modern, you can throw Tifa down on 2, play a fetch land and a scale up on 3, and then just start absolutely rolling your opponents. Now, I talked kind of negatively about a couple of these job select cards, but one of the ones that I think does have some potential, maybe not in Standard, maybe not in Pioneer, but it has potential, is Astrologian's Planisphere. Alright? It's 1 and a blue, so basically the opposite of Corey's Steel Cutter. Turns your creature into a wizard, doesn't do any of the weird buffs that the other ones do, but it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. That can turn your Tamios and things into relevant threats in the modern version of the deck. In the Standard and Pioneer versions, you're not necessarily casting like 0 mana, like non-creature spells, but being able to turn these like job select creatures into serious threats, and then turning the stuff that you equip it to into serious threats is huge. Tifa and similar cards that we're going to see in Standard, there's a very good chance that we could see a Gruul build that runs like Monstrous Rage on a Tifa, and then, God forbid, you could play something like Fabled Passage. Could be good, and especially with some of the lands rotating out of Standard, there's something there. Plus you can play like World Souls Rage and do a lot of interesting things. There's some potential here. And then you got all the birds. The birds add a lot of power. There's a lot that can go on in this prowess shell, but things would have to be, again, different from what they're like now. Alright, and then let's go ahead and talk about Titan. Alright, now I always put this weird phonetic pronunciation there because every time I've seen people talking about the Amulet Titan decks on coverage, they always overpronounce the different syllables in it, so you gotta do it. Alright, but Titan decks did get a little bit of a power-up in the Wandering Minstrel. I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter talking about this particular card and how good it could be in the CEDH format, but again, this is a tutorable version of Amulet of Vigor. Being able to go land Amulet on 1, this potentially on 2 does seem good. Being able to Summoner's Pact it in Modern seems really good. And for Standard, with the way that the format's going to look after rotation, when Edge of Eternities comes out in like August, this card's going to be really good. A lot of tap lands are going to be in the format, and it's going to be really easy to utilize that first bit of text where it's just everything's untapped. Now, you're definitely going to see less of this second and third abilities being super relevant, especially when you start to look at older competitive formats, because let's be very real, with Pioneer and with Modern, those towns are going to be useless. Alright? This town is only big enough for one town, and it's none of these garbage lands. The only one that actually has any potential is Starting Town, which it's really conditional. It has to be your first, second, or third turn in order for it to be good. And sure, with Minstrel, that's fine. And the poo poo UFO is literally, as the name suggests, poo poo. You're never going to get the number of towns necessary for this to be relevant. Putting a land from your hand onto the battlefield is cool, but But in Modern, this opens up a lot of doors. Alright, a 5th amulet that you can utilize that also just happens to be a creature, not bad. You can hit it with the Summoner's Pact. You can hit it with the Zenith. If you wanted to use the weird Harmonize spell out of Tarkir, yeah, you could even do that too. There's a lot of options. Titan will want at least one of this card. And in Standard and Pioneer, there's a lot of room to build. But it's not going to be using the town mechanic as much as we think that it would. Alright, continuing to look at Modern and talk about how some of these things are going to be good. Affinity is back. The last time that I made one of these presentation videos, I talked about how Affinity was back, but how it wasn't actually back. When I initially talked about it, it was because Kappa Cannoneer had gotten printed into the format, but Mox Opal, when I said that, was banned. And then, for whatever reason, these crazy people at WotC decided to unban Mox Opal. And Affinity is back. Urza's Saga is there, and Affinity has been tearing things up. Mono Blue Affinity in particular in Modern has gotten a lot of traction. And it's gotten a huge power up from this set because of the Saga rules. Urza's Saga now says if a Blood Moon hits the battlefield, it doesn't go to the graveyard. It just keeps whatever Saga abilities it already had. So if Saga's on 2, you get the Saga on 2 abilities. Doesn't get any more lore counters, doesn't lose any. Doesn't go to the graveyard, it just stays there with this relevant bit of text on it. It's already gotten a lot from this Final Fantasy set because of the rules change, and it gets nothing else. Lunatic Pandora, Elixir, Excalibur 2, all of these are good 1-mana artifacts that can be found off of Urza's Saga, and they're all trash. Elixir and Excalibur 2 could maybe have some like Standard and Pioneer relevance, but it's kind of doubtful that they will. Elixir enters tapped, and sure, it does the Elixir of Immortality thing where you gain life equal to the number of cards shuffled into your library. Works really well with Excalibur 2. And sure, there's probably going to be someone out there who decides to run Excalibur and Elixir of Immortality in an Urza Saga deck, but meh. In the newer competitive formats, you might see these alongside one another, but it's not going to be Affinity the way that we are so used to it in some of the older comp formats. But they've already gotten huge power-ups. There's a good chance that someone at the Final Fantasy Pro Tour in like a week, because when this video goes up Monday, we're going to be just a little over a week away from the Final Fantasy Pro Tour. Someone's probably going to be running a blue-white Affinity deck that is running some number of the standard legal cards. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But in Modern, this house is here and ain't nothing shaking it. And continuing to talk about Modern because Standard and Pioneer, as we're going to talk about and kind of lament later on, is really just a 2 or 3 deck format. Modern has a good bit of variety, and that's not to say that Standard and Pioneer are boring, just they're for the most part solved, and we're only going to see some big changes once this set starts to come out. Opera Love Song, however, is really going to change the look of the modern Storm deck. Be prepared for me to try this card out at some point in the future, either if I try to live stream or if I just keep up some of the video content. Opera Love Song ends up doing a impulse draw at instant speed, which is stuff that Ral loves in the Storm deck. Alright, Reckless Impulse, Ren's Resolve, great spells, but they're all at sorcery speed. You can only do them on your turn. And you really don't want to splash green, that way you can run the Druid that gets extra counters on it. Like, sure, it's fine and it's an adventure, but meh. This just works out really well. Instant speed, exile the top 2 cards, you can play them until your next turn. It's good. It does exactly what it needs to, and if you were going to try to storm off, do things in Standard or in Pioneer, pumping up some of your creatures can be kind of relevant. Ral, the blue-red Ral that's a 4-drop Planeswalker in Standard, is seeing some play in Prowess sideboards. I could maybe see a world where this card shows up. It's probably a blue-red control build, more focused on Ral, but hey, that's still something that this Opera Love Song can really work with. Glimpse the Impossible definitely would be the big cut though, so womp womp, card's trash. Now, there's nothing like this in Pioneer. Alright, the Reanimator decks that exist in Standard are definitely going to be doing some real spicy stuff with Ardan the Usurper. Guaranteed, you're going to see some Reanimator decks in Modern trying out Ardan. Alright, any Goryo's Vengeance deck will definitely want this. That way they can, in their main phase, reanimate this and then reanimate more stuff. Alright, being able to take 2 things on a single turn is really good. Alright, making it a 5/5 demon is impressive. If you're doing this in Standard, if you're a mono black or Rakdos Reanimator deck, this means that you get to take those copies of the Black Room that does some relevant stuff for demons, and you get to make it good again. Ardan's a really good creature for that deck. And with Persist, there's so many big, dumb Saga targets that you're definitely going to see people trying this out there. Is it still going to be objectively better just to get back an Archon of Cruelty? Yes. But content creators got to create content. So let's reanimate some of those sagas. Let's reanimate that big thing that gives us protection from all of our opponent's spells. But I think Ardan's going to have some really good spicy potential. But again, there's a lot of legendary things to get spicy with. So be prepared. Next, we're going to talk about the graveyard. Alright, this has popped up in Pioneer on a couple of different occasions, but Pioneer Dredge, Dredgeless Dredge in Pioneer has been around. Thinking about it in Standard, we saw the Golgari Graveyard deck doing really well at Pro Tour Aether Drift. Cough, cough, the Pro Tour I was at. Let's be real, graveyard shenanigans are not necessarily being punished right now. Despite the fact that Leyline of the Void exists in Standard, it's not seeing heavy amounts of play. You're just seeing, what? The Ghost Vacuum dealing with one thing at a time? Let's be real, Diamond Weapon in the Golgari Graveyard deck does have a lot of potential. Being able to prevent all damage, huge. And just green green, being able to trigger up the beanstalk, perfect. Chances are we could see that same Golgari graveyard deck really start to pop off in Pioneer 2. Thinking about Dredgeless Dredge, Emmett Select, alright, however you pronounce his name. The Final Fantasy 14 players can definitely get angry in the comments and tell me how I should pronounce it. This guy, the villain of the series, is going to be really good to actually help that deck out. Alright, he transforms into a 6/6 that lets you cast stuff out of your graveyard. If you're running some of the relevant Ether Drift cards, like Dredger's Insight, you're going to see this card and that working out really well together. If you're a modern Dredger, shout out Daniel, one of my favorite Twitter people, former Twitter people, big Dredge fan, pointed out that Esper Origins could actually be a relevant card. Alright, Surveilling 2, gaining some life, and then if you flash it back, it turns into a relevant saga on the back. Kind of good. Kind of worth it. Feeds into everything that Dredge wants to do. Why not? And then Summon Titan, it's a 5 mana saga creature. Mill 5 cards, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and then giving a single creature trample and +X where it's the number of lands you control. Listen, if you're doing Primeval Titan things or just graveyard land reanimation shenanigans, this card seems perfect for you. There's a standard deck that definitely wants these 3 things together. It's just a matter of putting it together. Alright, and let's be real, we were going to talk about Vivvy in a couple of different capacities. CEDH Vivvy is great, but let's throw Vivvy in the slop. Okay? For those of you that haven't seen people talking about some of the weird combos that you can do with this, that are using relevant competitive cards, or even kind of unknown ones, if you take an Agatha's Soul Cauldron and throw Vivvy underneath it, and you have a Geralf the Fleshright underneath it, whenever you cast a spell other than your first spell, you don't get the Vivvy ability here, but you can make some mana. Alright? You get to make 2. Technically 3, since Vivvy's going to be underneath it and you're putting the counter there. So yay, 3 mana in any combination of blue or red. Well, why does that matter? A lot of good blue cantrips right now in Standard. That's great. But if you cast a spell other than your first one, you make a zombie. That zombie has a 1/1 counter. Because it's got a 1/1 counter, it has the abilities of Vivvy. So congratulations, you keep making mana. And each spell you cast after that first one makes more zombies. You make more counters. You keep putting more counters on more zombies. Those get bigger. More amounts of mana. You basically have the potential, if you have enough of these cantrips that just keep you drawing into different things, to not only draw your whole deck, but to potentially make infinitely large zombie things, where that infinite is the amount of really spells that you have the ability to cast. It's huge. Now, thinking about the Soul Cauldron, and thinking about some of these older formats, particularly modern, where Walking Ballista is the only format where that's still legal in a competitive sense. Alright, you throw that under an Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and you put that counter over here on Aerith Gainsborough. Whenever you gain life, put a counter on her. So, Agatha's Soul Cauldron puts a counter on her. She becomes a 3/3 with Walking Ballista's text. Ping with that Walking Ballista ability where you remove a counter. Oh, I gain life because of Aerith. Ping, ping, ping. Alright, the Flower Girl starts shooting. And it is insane. Technically, they did put a similar type of infinite combo in the Bant Commander deck from this set, but putting this in the slop and then making the flower girl just start shooting, it's definitely worth it. It's good that we don't have this card in Pioneer, because Aerith and that would be an absolute mess to try and deal with. But I'm sure eventually we're going to see some similar type of shenanigans available to her, because when things rotate in the fall, Agatha's Soul Cauldron gets to stay around. And I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to see some interesting firearms making their way into the Standard and Pioneer formats because of Edge of Eternities. Be on the lookout for this combination of stuff. And definitely don't be surprised if someone is trying this Geralf the Fleshright combo with Vivvy at the Pro Tour. And then we gotta sack it up. Alright? In the formats where it is legal, Cat Oven, or even just the Cat Sacrifice Shell, is insane. If not a tier 1 deck, then definitely tier 2. In Pioneer's history, the Rakdos and then eventually Golgari Cat Oven decks have definitely floated somewhere between tier 1 and tier 2 throughout most of the format's existence. Samwise Gamgee and the Abzan Sam food combo has definitely popped off in Modern as of late. Tier 2.5, tier 3 in terms of competitiveness, but maybe Sepharoth will help that level up. Alright, whenever he enters or attacks, sacrifice a creature. If you do, draw a card. Oh no, the cat goes away, we draw a card. But whenever another creature dies, note that this is another creature. It doesn't have to be a creature you control. So you can just start killing your opponent's stuff and it triggers Sepharoth. But the most efficient way to do it is through comboing. So, food, shenanigans. Alright, target opponent loses a life, you gain a life. If it's the 4th time that this ability is triggered, you transform Sepharoth. And he makes an emblem. You cannot currently interact with emblems in Magic the Gathering. So you just forever get to put something on your opponent that says, whenever a creature dies, a opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. So you get to keep this Blood Artist effect on the battlefield forever. Sephiroth could be removed, but if it transforms into the one-winged angel, you're sending your opponent into the afterlife. And that is a perfect little thing. Now, that being said, do you really need Sephiroth to make these combos a reality? With Samwise Gamgee, you don't. Alright, you can make it go infinite regardless, but having the backup is huge. Do you really need it in Pioneer because you've got Yigra? Not necessarily, but being able to potentially do that combo a turn earlier is huge. So again, you gotta keep the option up there. Sure, is it going to immediately win the game? No, but it is a backup to your existing combos. And we like security with our combos. We like being able to guarantee wins. And this definitely guarantees those wins. Now, the reality is, Pioneer and Standard are dominated by monstrous rage decks. When I was just looking at the data from MTGO Top 8 earlier, or MTG Top 8, monstrous rage decks, the mono red deck made up 20% of the recent finishes in the Pioneer format. That is huge. But even looking at Standard, based on some recent stuff that Fire Shoes tweeted out, there was a Standard challenge where Mono Red and the Izzet deck were the only decks in the top 8 of that format. Monstrous Rage is a staple of Pioneer and Standard, which means it's better to be playing red and getting your opponents dead. Alright, if you're playing a Monstrous Rage deck, you've got a lot of options. It's important for us to know, though, those options don't necessarily include a lot of green or black. The only reason why we've got Midgar City of Mako here is just because it gives you the ability to sacrifice a creature and draw some cards. That's kind of relevant when you've got things like Cacophony Scamp or Heartfire Hero that want you to sack them in order to deal some damage to your opponents. That's the only reason why this is here. There was the Gruul deck that dominated Standard for a while, but that deck's really fallen off in favor of the blue-red Corey Steel decks or just mono-red. Red itself is the base, and then you can flavor it as necessary. Suplex is going to be kind of huge in the format. Alright, a Braid is already a big component. It deals 3 damage to something and it destroys a target artifact. Suplex deals 3 damage to any creature and then exiles them. It exiles a target artifact. It is a slight upgrade to a Braid. Now, it's a sorcery speed. You lose out on that, but being able to make sure that your opponent doesn't get back a creature, doesn't get any of the death triggers off of some of their creatures is pretty important. Being able to exile a Corey Steel Cutter or any other relevant artifacts they might be playing is huge. Now, as far as other red things go, Mage Siege, if you're wanting to play the long game, and let's be real, you want a utility land in red, maybe 2 or 3, this isn't the worst. Alright, 3 mana for an instant speed adventure, sure, it's fine. You're never wanting to play this on turn 1, you never want this to be the first or the only land that you have in hand, but it kind of works. Joshua and Lightning reopen the potential for the mono-red killer of really Boros aggro to come back. Sheltered by Ghosts is a heck of a card, and throwing a Sheltered by Ghosts on either of these things, giving it ward, and then letting you bring some other stuff back is kind of huge. In the mono-red shell, or even in the older Rakdos shell that used to exist with Callous Sellsword, being able to fling your mice, your little creatures at your opponent was huge. Self-destruct literally does that. Alright? Target creature you control deals X damage to any other target and X to itself, where X is its power. That means that all of the Valiant triggers that your stuff has will go off. So it's just boom, damage to you, damage to itself, Valiant trigger. It gets pumped up if you're looking at Heartfire Hero, or you get the card off the top if it is the Emberheart Challenger. Fantastic stuff. They get pumped up. It's all just going right at your opponent's face. This gives Mono Red the option to do everything that Rakdos did while not really tampering with its mana base, which is huge because we're about to lose about half of the fast lands in the format. They rotate out with Phyrexia, all will be 1. That's important to consider. And Vivvy is just Vivvy. Alright, dealing a damage, putting a counter on itself, Vivvy is great. There's a reason why Vivvy was like $100+ a couple weeks ago while spoiler season was still going on. We love Vivvy. Vivvy's going to be a menace. Alright, and this is more to my teammate Jacob. It's never going to be hammer time. Stop trying to make fetch happen, Gretchen. It's not going to happen. Alright, everyone was super hyped about Cloud and the Buster Sword when they got revealed, and Saffron Olive a couple years ago made a Pioneer version of the Hammer deck. Saffron Olive is kind of responsible for pioneering the stand or the modern version of Hammer that came into existence. But over the last couple of sets, Hammer hasn't necessarily been the most relevant of decks. Disgruntled Elk on Twitter is a big time Hammer aficionado, posts on his YouTube channel kind of regularly with Hammer content. And Corey Steelcutter's definitely helped, but I don't think we're going to be getting Hammer time the way that we've had it in the past. Cloud does a impression of Stoneforge Mystic, but it doesn't have the extra power that Stoneforge did in being able to throw expensive equipments onto the battlefield. Stolen Uniform gives us the ability to equip things at instant speed, which is sick, but there's not really that much that's good with the equipments, especially in Standard or Pioneer. And in Modern, sure, you can play Cloud, but you're already doing a lot more relevant things in the Hammer colors. Buster Sword is really the standout from this equipment deck. Alright, Masamune, Sepharoth Sword, whatever it's called, the long one. It's fine, but Buster Sword is good. There's a lot of potential here. Alright, whenever the creature deals combat damage, draw a card, then you can cast a spell for free without paying its mana cost. We love free spells, and Cloud being able to do that twice is kind of lit. Having a mana dork to make all of this stuff happen earlier is kind of lit, but it's not going to happen. People have been trying it in early access, and it's fine. I don't think the competitive ability for the deck to survive is there in Standard or in Pioneer. And we've had the pieces to make the equipment deck relevant for a while, and it's just never had the staying power. Buster Sword might put it closer, but I don't think it's going to be there. But let's go ahead and talk about the one Standard deck that is going to come back. And that's Temur World Souls Rage. Alright, for those of you that don't remember Standard of about a year and a half ago, there was this Temur World Souls Rage deck that brought a bunch of stuff back from the graveyard, brought it in untapped, and had you dealing just fireballs for lethal damage with World Souls Rage and all of your lands coming back from the graveyard to the battlefield. We saw this with like Slowgurk and other things too. Wandering Minstrel makes its appearance yet again. And there's some extra things that we can add, some extra landfall shenanigans. Saz's Chocobo puts a counter on itself whenever a land enters the battlefield. Sabo Tender is another Cactar that deals damage whenever a land enters the battlefield. You've got the black version of this with Offspring. All of those are really good cards that you can play. But World Souls Rage and Overlord of the Hauntwoods and Wandering Minstrel and Terra are all the things that are really just tying this room together. Alright, Terra in particular mills 5 cards, puts up to 1 enchantment card milled that way into your hand. Guess what? Overlord of the Hauntwoods is an enchantment. Oh my gosh, if you did this in the Domain deck, you could also get back a Leyline Binding. And then when Terra flips, does absolutely insane stuff. It becomes another one of those saga creatures. It makes a bunch of mana. It's really strong. For the Domain deck in Standard, I think there's a version that wants to just keep up with the normal Overlord of the Hauntwoods, Leyline Binding, Zur shenanigans. But I think there's a version that wants to do this as well to hopefully end the game faster. Sure, being able to do the Overlord beatdown plan is fine, but we're starting to get a lot more things that deal with killing relevant artifacts or dealing with the relevant enchantments. A lot more of Get Lost is being played in the format. Maybe moving away from being overly reliant on these enchantments to focusing more on the graveyard land component could be kind of good. And I think, again, that's exactly what we're looking for. And we had to go for the most powerful spell in the Final Fantasy universe in order to do this. Which, just for those of you that didn't know this, a nice little bit of trivia. There's only like 3 characters that have ever been able to cast it, and one of them is Donald Duck in the Kingdom Hearts series. Who would have guessed? Alright, but the next thing that we're going to talk about is Harambe's Revenge. Now, this was a card after my own heart that is Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. And then this Final Fantasy set had to go and print Vaughn. Alright, one of the protagonists of Final Fantasy XII basically turns all of your scouts, pirates, and rogues into Ragavan. You can take cards off of your opponent's deck and you can cast it. If you don't, you make a treasure token. And if you cast a spell that you don't own, you put a 1/1 counter on each rogue, pirate, and scout you control. Guess what? Throw this in Pioneer, and you can basically take the blue-red rogues deck, go Grixis, and turn every relevant creature into Ragavan. Just throw it on human, even. Throw a cavern in there on human. And this really pops off because all of the relevant rogues in Pioneer are humans. Note that I'm saying the relevant ones. Alright, the blue-black one that is a lord that flies and has flash is a human. The mono-black one that's a 1-drop that gets bigger with each card that's in the graveyard, it's a human. Vaughn works well with them. Now, in Standard, this is going to be a little bit harder to pull off. But you do have stuff like Gonti, Night Minister from Aetherdrift. That's a 4-drop. But this does seem sick. It works really well with it. I can see the potential. I can see the vision. I like it. So, that's why it made this list of potential cards. But it's more of a hope than anything else. And R.I.P. Harambe, you would have loved being able to steal stuff off of your opponent's deck. Alright, let's talk about the Against the Odds cards. Alright, Saffron Olive knows that we want this. All of the MTG Goldfish channel knows that we want this, which is why they made their whole Jumbo Cactar Commander video not that long ago, and there was a lot of relevant things that were happening with Jumbo Cactar. Early on in preview season, people were lamenting this card that deals 10,000 damage and that can be flinged at people. And that Commander video, the Commander Clash video, definitely showed off its power. But in Standard, it's not going to be all that powerful. But when you hear Against the Odds, you're going to see this card there. I guarantee you he's going to try to make it work. Same with Ancient Adamantoys, alright, based off of D&D's Tarask. Ooh, this thing has 20 toughness. Yay, all of the, like, Tree Folk, Big Butts Matter decks are going to care about this. This isn't going to be doing anything. It's an 8-mana card. You're going to be struggling to even cast this thing. Alright, it's not going to be relevant in any 60-card format. You can just exile it, do any number of things to it. You can deal with it easily. Yay, it stops you from taking damage, though. I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, but it's not good. I want the Water Crystal to be good. Alright, Krim wants the Water Crystal to be good. Milling 4 times the amount of cards is huge. If you're building a Bruvac deck in Commander, you probably want this card. It's not going to be relevant in Constructed. The only time where it might be is if you're going to build one of those rogue mill decks, which River Churn Monument, Jace, if you really wanted to try and do Dimir Mill, sure, go for it. You're not going to be winning a lot of games. Xenos Ye Galvis, everyone was kind of hyped up over the backside of this card. It's only relevant in multiplayer games. And I'm saying this to myself, so holding my own hand when I say this. Dark Confidant. was a powerful card in 2016 in Jund. In 2025, 9 years after the fact, that card is not good. If you're playing Dark Confidant in Standard or in Pioneer, you're dying on turn 3 because someone cast a Monstrous Rage on a 1-drop creature, and then you're dying in your upkeep to taking a single damage off of that thing. Congratulations, do not play Dark Confidant, because even after rotation, if nothing from Bloomburrow goes, and if nothing from Wilds of Eldraine goes, you're still going to be dying to Monstrous Rage. But I've got my own wishes. I want Cecil to be good. The idea of basically doing some type of Death Shadow thing to yourself is great. A 1-drop 2/3 that can become a 4/4, fantastic. Kuja, being able to make a lot of like black mages is just so nice. And then making all of your black mages deal double damage on his backside, great. Hope is such an interesting take on a mill deck where it's just, oh, you mill based on how much life you gained? I would love to see this pop off in Pioneer. Let's take the Angels deck and throw this in there as just an extra win con. Wouldn't that be sweet just to watch happen? Clive is big burly sword man that turns into big angry dragon man that discards your whole hand and draws you cards equal to your devotion to red. I love red decks, and this seems like an interesting red card. And the Knights of the Round, for those of you that never played Final Fantasy VII and worked your way towards getting this summon that took like 2.5 minutes to even go through the full animation, there's a reason it costs 8 mana. But I want to see someone take a Persist and bring this thing back on 2, and then just watch it stick around forever, making all of these knights every single turn, and then just beating your opponent to death with pure value. That's what I want to see. But the other thing that I want to see is you guys commenting down below. Tell me what cards, again, you think that should be on this list. Because there's a good chance that I missed something between talking about Standard and Pioneer and Modern. Maybe I missed a good card. Maybe I was too honed in on a particular thing. Who knows? Don't forget, like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.